Hello and welcome back to Rocinante podcast. I'm Sean P. McCarthy, here as always with Angela Nagel, and we are back with our close friend, our frequent contributor, the number one America hater on the internet, Malcom Kyeyune. Malcolm, last time you were here, you predicted, we all predicted that this war would happen and that it would be the end of America as we know it. So we are March 25th, 2026. This is day 26 of our special military operation against Iran. And just to kind of start it off, Malcolm, is everything proceeding according to your plan? Or have some things surprised you?
Yeah, I mean, I said this before we started recording, but I brought up the example of, the first Jurassic Park movie where you have like this paleontologist, Dr. Alan Grant, and he loves dinosaurs, so he spends his time in the desert like digging up bones or whatever, going, oh man, these dinosaurs are so cool. What if I could see a dinosaur in real life? But obviously that will never happen. And then he gets invited to Jurassic Park, and there's that very iconic scene of them seeing like the Brachiosaurus or whatever for the first time, and him just like dropping his jaw to the floor and just staring there in like mute silence at like dinosaurs for real this time. I mean, I feel like that with American Collapse. I've been, reading, seeing like the fossils, the historical records of this kind of imperial collapse, saying, wow, these things actually happened. And now it's playing out before all of our eyes, and it's even bigger than we imagined. So in general, to finally answer your question, overall, I would say that this war has gone slightly worse for the Americans than I expected. And I did not have high hopes for the Americans, let it be known. But in general, like the strategic situation right now is just a complete disaster. The U.S. has been pushed out of all of its military bases in the Gulf. It is flying refueling missions from Romania and like Crete and bases in Italy. It is flying strategic bombers from bases in the UK. Why? Because you can't actually base these things that much closer to the action without them getting destroyed. Like flying, you kind of have to realize that a bombing campaign, like it's all about how many sorties you can generate. It doesn't matter if you have like a lot of planes, if none of them work and or they have to fly across the entire planet to drop one bomb and then return. Like you're not going to get enough bombs per hour for it to matter. And all of that, like all of the signs right now are that the U.S. military, like the air campaign is winding down already due to being forced away by missiles, due to these planes being really fucking old and not being designed to sustain high tempo operations at like age 60 or whatever. And also the U.S. is running out of standoff munitions. So there was this chart posted where apparently like the U.S. has maybe 1 month left of standoff cruise missiles, air-launched cruise missiles. And like for a lot of interceptors and for a lot of Israeli weaponry, there's less than a month left. So like 3 weeks from the time of recording, they just won't have much in the way of actual munitions capable of striking Iran. So that's kind of the military side of this. And then we have the economic and political side where the Iranians are now the kings of the Hormuz Strait. And they have imposed some sort of, they might even have mined large parts of the strait at this point because the fuel tankers and large crude carriers and so on that are moving out of the Strait of Hormuz or the Persian Gulf, they are now using a route that was never used before, where they sail between like these Iranian islands that they have really close to the shoreline so they can be visually inspected by the IRGC. And that basically means that in order to escape the Persian Gulf, you have to pay a toll to Iran at this point. So even if you knocked out Iran's oil exports at this point, they could sustain, they could make more money just putting fees and tolls on oil produced by other countries than they could by exporting their own oil. So you have that situation, and then you have like the growing Mad Maxification of Australia and Japan and so on, like where they're running out of fuel and all of that. And Trump himself, he's sleepier than Sleepy Biden was at this point in his presidency. Like we're only in the, if you recall the Trump or the Biden presidency, like he was kind of, sort of, maybe-ish okay for 2 years or so during the presidency. And then he really started sundowning hard. Well, I mean, Trump is sundowning hard and he's 1 year into his presidency. Actually, a little bit less. A little bit more than a year. But, yeah.
Well, it's interesting, Malcolm. I agree with everything you're saying, but kind of the surreal nature of this is I thought the financial market people were supposed to be these geniuses, the smartest people in the world. That's why they make tens of millions of dollars at Goldman Sachs or whatever. But so the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed up today. Oil is trading at about $90 a barrel, $91 a barrel, at least paper oil. And so we're recording this on a Wednesday. It seems to me like Trump they're talking about negotiations. Pakistan is a mediator with these negotiations. Trump is talking about we're near a ceasefire. Israeli media said Netanyahu said Trump might do a ceasefire this upcoming Saturday. And it seems to me like they're just trying, the Trump administration, to fudge their way through the trading week. And then after the market close Friday, they're going to do something stupid this weekend and try to hit Iran, maybe a Karg Island invasion with the Marines. I saw somebody online call it the Bay of Goy Cattle or something like that. Yeah. But I guess, yeah, Malcolm, what's your read on the disconnect between the paper markets and like the reality of these actual oil shortages that are taking place?
I mean, it's not a coincidence that one of the seminal works on the collapse of the Soviet Union is named "Everything Was Forever Until It Was No More." I mean, normalcy bias and complacency are real killers for any sort of empire on the downslope, or the ancient regime in France. Like you tend to get this dynamic where everyone kind of realizes that something is wrong, but there's actually no money and no sort of structural incentives to recognizing that. So, like the manipulation, for example, like it can continue for a while until you get like physical shortages, because like the pricing mechanism, it's like the second best way of rationing scarce resources. Like the best way in situations like these is probably some form of industrial planning done by the government, which is what they have in China. What they have in like serious countries, what they would have in America during the Second World War. But if you can't have that, if you can't have industrial planning and basically the state and society going in and saying, okay, vacation trips using diesel are not necessarily that interesting or relevant right now. We need diesel to keep to go to trucks in order to make sure everyone can go to the store and buy food without getting raped by the sticker shock. If you can't have a society that says that, you can at least have a functioning pricing mechanism. So the guy taking a joyride or a vacation road trip or whatever using his diesel car says, like, is this vacation really worth it? But right now they're basically disabled the pricing mechanism, and they're not going to do industrial planning. So what will happen is that diesel will just run out across the board. This is happening in Australia already. Like if you're a fisherman or whatever, you can't get diesel. So you have this dynamic where the the focus on forms and like the abstracted level of the economy, like only on abstractions, on narratives, that kind of lulls elites into a false sense of security where they're actually destroying the real economy. And I talked to a guy who's like this hedge fund dude, and he wanted me to explain this. And I basically used the... I had a doctor friend once who told me about one of his most interesting and kind of macabre cases, which was like an athlete, like a professional marathon runner, who got this condition called, I can't remember the name, but it's basically like you have some sort of nerve damage or whatever, so you develop this chronic inability to feel pain. You can have that from childhood, or it can develop once you're an adult. But for children, like the inability to feel pain is usually really, really dangerous, because they will like bump into things, they will like harm themselves, they will trigger a bunch of internal bleeding, but like they won't even notice it. So like they rack up all of this damage to the body without actually realizing it themselves. And sometimes they do it so much that they die before they figure out that something's wrong. But if you're a professional athlete and you develop this, like this guy, what happened to him was that he ran some marathon through like Death Valley or whatever, which is like the most demanding like foot race in the world. And he's like, I can do this, no problem. Like, I don't feel anything. And so he basically ran until he destroyed his muscles. Like, they basically jellified. And when that happens, like, you basically, you expel, like, the tissue through your urine. So if you go to piss, like, your piss looks like Coca-Cola. Like, it's black. And like, that's what happens if you can't actually have any sort of connection to your like physical reality.
Like that's me after St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you're Irish, so you're built for that stuff. But
can I just say, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's just a thought I've been having, and it's sort of half worked out in my mind. I don't know if it's too much of an elaborate conspiracy theory or whatever, but because America is a net oil and gas exporter, and like Europe, for example, is an importer, is it possible that they have factored in this as a kind of imperial logic where it will do more damage? Yes, it will damage America, but it will damage other places more. And because, I mean, the whole logic of imperialism, say, for example, in the British Empire, was you ban manufacturing in the colonies. You basically try to slow down development as much as possible elsewhere so that the process, they'll get there eventually, right? But you can just slow them down so that you're always ahead. Is there kind of possibility that they've actually calculated that in some way, that they know that this will be fatal for Europe, like potentially?
I think they have, like, on the margins they have, but all of that is all actually what the British call being too clever by half. Like, it's what I'm saying here is just that, like, if someone says, well, this was the plan, you can just tell them, yes, I'm sure it was, but you're still coping. Because the issue here is that, like, again, like, the problem we have is that the world economy is so complex that basically nobody can understand it.
Yeah.
You have a couple of people who are like these Bobby Fischer, like, type geniuses or whatever, who live in a shoebox somewhere in, like, East Asia, and they might, like, genuinely claim, yeah, I know how, like, this big interconnected machine works. But, like, outside of these weird Shaolin masters, nobody really gets it. And in the American intelligentsia, if we can use that term, or the political leadership class, like, nobody gets it. And so they will say, yes, I mean, we are net exporters, that means we win. And that is the level of their analysis. But what they don't factor in is actually that America is not self-sufficient in all of the different kinds of oil grades that are needed to run an industrial economy. So the primary thing that America produces is light sweet crude. So it's light and it's not sour. You need sour oil for a lot of things, like making sulfuric acid and so on. And what I'm trying to get here is that America actually imports a ton of oil, like on a regular, ongoing basis. And then it exports a ton of oil. Because it's like, you're playing fucking Settlers or something, and you make this commodity that you need to produce shields, but you don't make this other commodity because you haven't opened the mine yet, so you need to buy that with imports. Well, I mean, America is not self-sufficient in everything, so for the American economy to function smoothly, it needs to keep exporting and it needs to keep importing. Otherwise, you will build up these hugely destructive imbalances, not just in the world economy, but inside America itself. Like if you have double the amount of oil that you can make gasoline out of, but you have none of the oil that you can make diesel out of, that's not a win. That's not a win for the US at all. Then if you say to like Mexico or whatever, yeah, well, we're not going to export the kind of oil you need to make gasoline, so you're going to run out, you're going to have shortages. Like, you will create a situation where they say, well, we're not going to export the oil you need to you. We're going to send it over to Asia or whatever because they pay more. So, I mean, this is like the perfect level of like being a midwit is inherently dangerous because you think you know how everything works and you know enough to really harm yourself. And that's kind of where the American elite are at. Like all of their policy planning, that's like this, 12-dimensional chess, we're going to hurt China, whatever. I mean, they had the same mindset with this military side of the operation. And to quote the great Dr. Phil, how's that working out for you?
Well, I should just mention to build on what you were saying there, Malcolm, about the first cracks that are forming in the global economic system. So as Malcolm mentioned, there are hundreds of fuel stations in Australia that are reporting shortages. Slovenia has become the first EU country to implement fuel rationing. And it's partly because Slovenia has regulated, kind of subsidized gas prices. So all these Austrians are going across the border and filling up and stocking up in Slovenia. So Slovenia has been forced to ration fuel. Politico reports Taiwan's electrical grid relies on 40% liquefied natural gas. They have an emergency stockpile of LNG of 11 days. So Taiwan may be forced to ration power or reduce electricity to its industrial sector. The Philippines became the first country to declare a national energy emergency. Government offices have moved to a 4-day work week. They've said the Philippines government has said grounding planes is a distinct possibility. I've seen a discussion that New Zealand has 3 weeks of fuel. But I think very significant for America, USPS, the U.S. Postal Service, they have imposed an 8% fuel surcharge on packages. So their biggest customer is Amazon, and that's absolutely going to be passed on. So if you are an American consumer, you're going to be paying more for your Amazon packages very immediately and very soon. So it is just kind of boggling my mind that I thought these financial market guys were the smartest people on earth, but I guess they're just getting tricked by Trump pretending to negotiate, or their heads are in the sand. I just can't really understand the disconnect here.
Yeah, I mean, it just, like, these people live in a world of illusions and abstractions, and they can't really keep up with the they can manipulate illusions, they can manipulate abstractions, and they can control narratives. But the way all of this ends is just that, like, some reality event is going to force everyone to recognize the truth. And again, this is kind of how empires and monarchies and so on collapse. But like, we are going to have a situation where essentially, like, you can't go and buy gas. If you live in a Western, like industrialized first world country, you're going to wake up one day in the not so distant future and they're going to say like, okay, you can buy 20 liters of gas per week if you bring your ration card, no more. And then people are going to realize that, oh shit, like they didn't really have this all planned out, did they? And I think that actually, like, what's more, I think, going to be driving this war is just how these illusions are crushed on the military rather than the economic side. I mean, I've said this before, but I don't have a military background. I didn't do like conscription service in Sweden because they were on the way to abolishing it, and I didn't really want to do it at the time. So like I wasn't really in consideration for it. And I don't really have this sort of OSINT, like, oh, whoa, planes are so cool attitude either. But I sort of became knowledgeable about the US military because I wanted to be an essayist. I wanted to write about the American political system and culture. And I kind of realized that you can't understand these things without understanding the military. Like this is trying to explain the tides without like factoring in the moon. Like the military and the perception of the military, that is like the moon spinning around the American polity and like pulling things hither and thither. And I bring this up simply because what you're seeing right now is this ideological crisis among the American political elite as they try to grapple with the fact that the US military is not all powerful, because these people are really old, they're increasingly senile. Recall Joe Biden, recall Donald Trump. Like both of these get this sort of senile old man rage if you try to point out that like the American military isn't necessarily the most powerful military in the world. Like, oh, how dare you say that to me, Jack? But the issue here is that if you can't deal with reality here, like you are going to try to force it into being, like you're going to try to force the means into being. So you end up seeing all of these cockamamie plans right now. And everyone I've listened to who has like good contacts inside the military, like Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, Colonel Daniel Davis, like all of these people, they're talking to their friends and they're saying there's going to be some form of ground operation like this weekend. But the issue is, like the US no longer has the ability to move actual, like militarily relevant amounts of equipment or troops from the continental United States to like the rest of the world. To do that, you need ships, because one really shitty, like a feeder ship, which is the term for a container ship that's really small, like it's supposed to go between some really small, I don't know, like chemical plant. They're going to load up a couple of containers and they're going to move from the chemical plant to like the big dock. And then they're going to unload their containers and load it onto the big boy, like the actual container ships. Well, like if you think about like American transport planes, the US military needs about 100 flights with their super expensive strategic airlifters in order to carry as much cargo as a shitty feeder ship that you can buy for a couple of $1 million or something. That's kind of the problems of scale we're dealing with. There's a reason we don't move cargo across the planet using planes. We do it using boats because that's so much more economical. Well, like the US can't move like divisions into the Middle East anymore. And also, like, the Ukraine war has illustrated that you really need to approach warfare completely differently, because you can't mass forces in the rear. Because the moment you try to have like an armor division, like line up all of its tanks in the rear lines in preparation of attack, like they get hit with drones and missiles. So you have to do like this super spread out thing. I mean, the Americans at this point are betting that they can go up against a country with a larger army than the entirety of the U.S. Army and the Marine Corps put together. Like if you add the Artesh and the Basij and like the IRGC, you end up with like 1 million soldiers, like regulars and sort of part-time soldiers. If you add the Marine Corps and you add the Army together, you end up with like 650K. So not only is there a huge like manpower advantage for Iran, but they have a huge defender advantage, like mountainous terrain and so on. And like the only thing America can send in is light infantry. And for those who don't know, light infantry is what we call infantry, who only really carry stuff that they can lug around in a backpack. And if you think about things you can lug around in a backpack, that's like a small mortar. That's like a man-portable anti-tank system, or a Stinger missile, like a man-portable air defense system. You can't really lug around like an automatic 40mm grenade launcher. That's a bit too heavy. You can't really lug around an M2 Browning. That's also too heavy, like a heavy machine gun. And you absolutely fucking can't lug around a 155mm howitzer. So you're standing there with, you know, your M4 carbine and your hand grenades and some other like special weapon on a like squad level or whatever, like a small grenade launcher or something. And you're gonna insert these people with helicopters on some fucking island that's super fortified. And you see all of these Americans, like all of these American boomers going, oh, they're sending 1,000 Marines. That's probably 800 too many. Like, it's just cape shit. It's just cape shit. Like, what special quality does a U.S. Marine Corps soldier have that makes them fucking immune to a 155mm artillery shell?
Especially because like Iran can just check the Trump administration bets on Poly Market to see where and when they'll land.
yeah, that too. But like you kind of see this, like militarily, all of the military guys are just going, this is a suicide mission. Look, if anyone like actually read our army manuals, like you can't do an operation like this. If you're going up like against a fortified position and they have fire superiority, meaning they can always throw like more drones and more artillery shells and more missiles at us than we can at them. You can't send in light infantry, like they're gonna get slaughtered. And we can't move in heavy equipment because we don't have like the physical capability to do so. But then you have all of these people, and this is kind of who the administration is made up of and who they're pandering to. You have all of these fucking boomers, like 60-year-old people going, they're sending in Delta Force. I read about this in a Tom Clancy novel 20 years ago. Like, they're gonna win because, like, Rainbow Six is on the scene. And it's like, it just, that these people are gonna get wrecked. Because at the end of the day, you can't actually win by cape shit. Like, America spent so much time creating this hyper reality of, I mean, I'll give you one example of just how this works. So, and I might have mentioned this at some point earlier, but like when I did my reading on this, I was watching, and I don't recommend this to anybody, but I was watching a lot of congressional hearings for the Armed Forces, Armed Services Committee in the House and the Senate. And during one of these committee hearings, the then Undersecretary of the Navy, Philip K. Raven, comes in and he gives, like, when you're doing these congressional hearings, you're always supposed to give like a boilerplate fucking speech before they get to question time. So Philip K. Raven goes up there in front of Congress and it says, essentially, the U.S. Navy is the most powerful navy in the world, number one. Number two, we have the most powerful technology in the world. Like, nobody can ever get close to us. Like, the Chinese can't ever hope to match our super technologically advanced science fiction capabilities. But number three, it doesn't really matter what technology we have, because technology has never been our weapon. The real weapon of the U.S. Navy is the U.S. sailor himself, like the Navy sailor, because the American sailor is the most capable, most lethal, most well-trained, most intelligent, most, killer instinct sailor that has ever existed on the face of the planet. You know what the context of this fucking hearing was? They were calling Philip K. Raven up there, together with his Army and Marine Corps buddies, because the U.S. was having this recruitment crisis, which has gotten even worse now. And the Navy's response to the recruitment crisis was to lower the standards so they could have class 4 applicants. And none of you know what that means. So here's the thing. If you watched Forrest Gump is a class 4 applicant on the armed forces, like the standardized aptitude test. Forrest Gump has 80 or 76 IQ. If you end up in class 4 when you take the ASVAB, you have 75 to 85 IQ. So after giving his spiel about the U.S. Navy being the most intelligent and well-trained fighting force in the world, he then said, this is why we have to bring in the retards. We can't keep this Navy going without people who have, they can go to the doctor and they can get, disability or whatever based on their low intelligence. So this is the American military, right? You have this fucking cake shit spiel about we are the best and the brightest in the world. They don't let you into the Navy without 100 IQ in China, because they don't have to. That is just pure desperation. And Hegseth is going up there right now going we are our mighty battle cock fucks the Iranian pussy in the skies over Tehran. And we are the most lethal guys in the world, blah, 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 blah. And the army just announced that they're raising the latest age at which you can apply from, I think it's what it was 44 years old. Now it's 42 years old.
Yeah.
And I thought I would escape the draft by being Unk, but apparently not.
Or smoking weed.
Yeah, that too. Neither of my tactics worked. They outsmarted me. I'm going to Iran.
You give me a 42-year-old weed smoking retard.
Yeah. But they would still give you the spiel about no other army on the planet. Even the Spartans would look at the American army. I go, wow, these people are so they're natural born warriors, and it's quasi homeless potheads with Norwood 5, and that is the American grunt. It's just it is this absurdity, but you have to realize that once this bubble. We have a bubble in AI, sure, but we have an even bigger bubble in terms of American military cape shit. Once people realize that an army that recruits semi-homeless potheads that are 42 years old is not an army with a future, which would be the least controversial point in the history of military warfare if it was applied to any other country than the United States.
Malcolm, did you get a 30-day Twitter ban for telling off some A-10 Warthog boomer? Or what happened there?
Yeah, that's the funniest thing. They're obviously doing a lot of heavy censorship on Twitter right now. They've changed their policies with regards to monetization, which doesn't bother me because I'm not a fucking blue check. But like they're doing all of these things. Like they banned this really good account that actually collated like a lot of updates on the war. It was very reliable. They banned him without an explanation, and then he got his account back a couple of days later without explanation. But in my case, I said, we need a day of the pillow for all of these stupid like boomers who just like gargle the nuts of a 50-year-old plane that's like completely doctrinally obsolete today. And that was like, you can't do like hateful speech. It's like, really? But
because you were advocating violence against the elderly.
advocating violence. I mean, like the day of but like the A-10, like it's this ground attack plane, and it's like the perfect encapsulation of this, because like the plane itself is 50 years old. Again, like the airframes are 50 years old because they stopped making the airframes in the 80s and they started in the 70s. And the manufacturer, Fairchild Republic, has not existed for like 20, 25 years or something. So they're defunct, long gone. And if you read like aviation, like military nerd papers, or like, you know, sort of monthly papers or whatever from the 80s, like in the 1980s, they're doing like profiles on this fucking plane, and they're going, yeah, it's kind of obsolete. Like it can't survive on the battlefield right now against Russian AD, but at least you can put some missiles on it, so it can fire from far away, so it can run away. So like even in the 80s, they were saying like, yeah, this is not the plane of the future, guys, because it's a plane designed essentially just to blow up tank columns in the Fulda Gap for a week until all of these planes get shot down by Russians. So it's just for like a World War III that never happened. And now, today, like this is ancient technology that is no longer tactically relevant against any sort of real foe. But you still have all of these people just lacing it. Because again, we have this huge bubble where so much value is trapped within this dying, decaying, broken system that if you have a correction event where people just mark to market, as they say on Wall Street, once you mark to market American military capabilities, the entire world order will collapse. And it's already collapsing, but the collapse will be finished once people are forced to do that.
No, I got, they gave me a warning and they made me delete a tweet where I said, Dear Iran, please level Ben Gurion Airport so the Israelis can't flee here. Thank you. and I guess that was advocating violence or something, but they seem to have gotten a little more strict on that kind of stuff.
I mean, it's go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so the plan, right, was something like, I think they had a very specific timeline of when they're going to do battle with China, right? And I mean, is this just off the table now?
Yeah,
Have they decided to just blow it all on?
Oh yeah, oh my God, it's 100% off the table, dude. Like even before this war, which America is going to lose, by the way. Like it's not going to walk away like declaring victory or whatever. It is going to be forced to admit, yeah, we suffered a military defeat, because otherwise, like the blockade will continue until America cries uncle. But like that, we're talking in terms of like this Iran war. We have maybe 1 month left of like cruise missiles, as I pointed out earlier. Like these cruise missiles were supposed to be the thing that defeated China and blew up the lander ships or whatever. So we're like, America has lost like half of its radars, like of certain configurations, like half of the radars in inventory in a couple of weeks. Then they can't build new ones because like all of the American military industrial complex is under Chinese industrial sanctions at this point. So any sort of weapon you fire off, you're never going to be able to replace it if it involves like rare earths or tungsten or whatever. And also, I mean, this was kind of lost in all the noise, but the U.S. Treasury Department just came out and basically officially said the U.S. is insolvent, it's bankrupt. They collated all of the on-book liabilities, which are like this understates the problem, but all the sort of official liabilities, and they compare that to the assets on the balance sheets of the U.S. government. And liabilities were like $42 trillion. Assets were $6 trillion. And the US is adding like $3 trillion at least in terms of government debt each year. So, I mean, once you're getting more and more people like Jamie Dimon and like other Wall Street mavens just going out and saying like, you can move your money out of the US right now, or you can live in a world where you no longer have money. Like, these are your two options. So everyone just realizes it's fucking over, man. Like, we are in the final looting phase. And like, so much of this war is apparently being fought just as a way to loot money from the treasury. And I don't mean this in the Sam Cedar report, like, oh, Lockheed Martin, like everything would be perfect without the military-industrial complex. Like, these are not the actually bad guys here. Like, people have these weird, almost anti-Semitic theories about like Raytheon being like the Council of Elders of Zion or whatever, but like these military industrial companies they're dying. Like they're not doing well. The entire military industrial base in the US, it's falling apart because of underfunding actually, but for structural reasons. Like there is a lot of corruption and a lot of looting, but there's not enough money going into the sector to actually keep subcontractors alive. And we're almost at the point where if you're a prime contractor, you can't actually make a plane like a military plane and turn a profit. And the US government is basically just trying to trick these prime contractors into signing contracts where these companies will lose money because they don't want to pay what it actually costs to keep this stuff going. But the real issue here is just that the sort of Wigland, like the narrative on parts of the left where we have like the military industrial complex, they're the ones pulling the strings. It just doesn't work. Like, you can't actually explain the what's going on here by pointing to these companies that barely make money producing stuff anymore and are dealing with like this insane inflation and that can't actually source inputs. But I was making another point, but I kind of forgot it in all my ranting. Sorry.
Well, no. It's actually a good transition because we could talk a little bit here about the Joe Kent resignation, about China, about the Israel lobby stuff. And it also gives me an opportunity to plug my Substack, seanpmccarthy.substack.com. But I wrote a piece that was basically, it's called The CIA versus the Mossad over Iran. And I make the argument that this kind of war with China, Joe Kent represents a faction of the ruling class that wanted to pivot to Asia, to have a war with China. Elbridge Colby is still within the Trump administration, but he's somebody who's spoken about this publicly before. Now he's kind of changed his tune and is keeping his head down. But the point is, so Joe Kent writes this resignation letter. He leaves as Trump's National Counterterrorism Center director. His resignation letter says that Iran was not an imminent threat to the U.S., that this war was heavily influenced and driven by Israel. He does an interview with Tucker Carlson, and he's making the media circuit where he's making pretty explosive claims, implying that Israel had a role in Charlie Kirk's assassination, implying that Trump feared assassination by Israel, that fake 2024 Iranian assassination plot against Trump was at least partially driven by Israel, all these sorts of things. And you mentioned Emma Vigeland there. Also, Matt Duss was Bernie Sanders' former foreign policy advisor. But what I find interesting is, so Joe Kent comes out and says, I mean, what we all know at this point, that Israel is the reason for this war. But the reaction of a lot of the left in the United States is to just kind of be horrified. So I'll quote Matt Duss. This is, again, Bernie Sanders' former foreign policy advisor. He says, quote, blaming Israel for America's forever wars is bad history that feeds anti-Semitism and undermines the existentially important project of reforming U.S. foreign policy. The main problem is in Washington, not Jerusalem or anywhere else. And he writes this article for Foreign Policy magazine that I read is just garbage. I mean, it's just a lot of finger wagging, but he doesn't have any sort of explanation of what is actually driving this, why the U.S. empire would be motivated to do this, to essentially blow up the petrodollar, to get the Strait of Hormuz closed. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I would wonder about both of your thoughts as to why the left has such a problem with analysis. Why don't they have a theory of why... a compelling theory, anyways, of why the U.S. is actually doing what it's doing right now?
Yeah, go ahead.
My view is simply just that there is too much of a taboo around anti-Semitism, and that they've absorbed that to such a point that they can't really look at direct facts. Although, to be fair, those people Matt Duss and the others, right? They all said this like almost exactly the same script at exactly the same time, which you often see in the American media, and it means that the script has been given by someone, right? I think. I mean, because that's what always happens. Like I was saying to you guys before we started recording, Tucker Carlson used to do this bit on his show when he was still on Fox, where they would edit together everyone saying the same thing on the same day. And it would be like exactly the same phrases, exactly the same argumentation. Well, this is like that. Okay, all of these kind of insider, Bernie kind of the left, like the AOC side of the Democratic Party kind of people, all like make this exact same argument at the same time, and it's a way for them actually to get out of the doghouse. Because the left was basically kicked out of polite society after October 7th because they were not sufficiently pro genocide, basically. And this script is their way to get back into polite society, to start, all their NGOs have been defunded and their university positions have been destroyed and everything. This is a way that all of these high status people can get back into polite society by copying this script and repeating this script, which is extremely useful, to the government right now. But it's just false. And the thing is, it's always much more difficult to contain a truth, which is that anyone can just show that it's a demonstrable fact that the American government is so dominated by essentially ethnic mafia politics that it is willing to destroy the empire, to certainly make it almost a certainty that the empire will be destroyed if they can just land a fatal blow, a chance of landing a fatal blow on Persia, on Purim, I don't know how much more clear it has to be. And, again, this is a demonstrable fact. You can go through the whole thing, the who is in the government, who is making decisions, what's the logic of the decisions, wrecking your own army, and wrecking, having all of this hostility with your allies as you approach this kind of grand showdown, as like this other power that has surpassed you developmentally is about to surpass you as potentially a world naval power, which is like the hinge bit of history. And to do something like this at this moment simply doesn't make any sense. And anyone who looks into it can discover this. And this is why, I notice Barry Weiss's publication, The Free Press, had an article saying this isn't Israel's war, it's Washington's war. But I mean, it was paywalled and all the comments were turned off. So I don't even know what was in there, but it's obviously not a very solid argument that they're very proud of.
Yeah, I mean, the issue here, and this is kind of the problem. I mean, I wrote that whole American Affairs thing about like the Nuremberg Christianity, which is kind of relevant to what's being discussed right now. So if you want to have my view on the sort of sacral dimension to this and like the ideological cornerstone that anti-Semitism has served for the West in the post-World War II order. I mean, that's what I would recommend you start. But there is an interesting thing here in terms of like the left's rearguard or parts of the left's rearguard action. Because I mean, anti-Semitism and accusations of it, like it's really actually quite interesting in how these accusations work. And I'm reminded of a term coined by some guy at the Claremont Institute, actually. It never really caught on. I think it was like the affirmation parallax or something, like really unwieldy. But like what he meant with that was essentially like you have certain positions where like the accusation of being antisocial or evil that you get for stating something. The mechanism here is completely dependent on the assumption like, or the suspicion that you don't like the thing you're talking about. So saying X is happening, if you think that's good, that's completely fine. But if people suspect that you think X is bad, then that's conspiratorial and evil. So, I mean, we can take this like poisoning wells, right? If you say, like settlers on the West Bank are going around poisoning wells, and you show like evidence for it, you will be quickly accused of spreading anti-Semitism or leaning into anti-Semitic tropes, because Europeans have always said that like Jews poison wells. And that may be so, but like if you can show, well, I mean, they're going around doing it. They're going on TV saying, I poisoned as well to kill the Palestinians. Like, what do you want me to say here? Like, I don't really care about what tropes existed in the 1300s. Like, this is a problem. It's actually happening. We can empirically show that it's happening, and it's bad. But if you say, we should poison more wells, we should kill all the Palestinians and definitely kill all the children too. Here is my latest article about this in Tablet magazine. Like, nobody's going to accuse you of spreading anti-Semitic tropes.
The Tablet magazine matzo ball recipe.
Yeah, because you think that poisoning wells is good. And so saying the IDF or Jewish settlers poison wells, like that's not a conspiracy as long as you think it's good. But if you think, I don't really like well poisonings that much, thank you very much. Like that is, you're just making that up, or you're spreading like Nazi propaganda, or you might be talking about a real thing, but it's still like very dangerous. I mean, it's kind of the same with, like if Barry Weiss goes up on the scene and says, yeah, we control the political system and that's great. Like nobody will accuse her of being like an anti-Semite, obviously. Like all of this entire field of ideological contestation, if you want to be like fancy about it, like the fight is so stupid in a way because there is a Mott and Bailey going on around here. Like,
right.
If you think that like we shouldn't have ethnic networks that have this huge gravitational pull on politics, if you think that's bad, you are accused of basically fighting against shadows. But if you hold a fucking conference and you invite everyone in Washington and like the topic of discussion. How can we make our ethnic network more effective? Like, this isn't about like empirical matters. This isn't about whether this exists or not. Like, that is just a Mott and Bailey argument. The actual fight being done by many on like the sort of dead ender left, but these people are quickly losing influence. It's just that you shouldn't really be talking about this, because if you talk about this, you could come to the conclusion that you don't like this and things need to change. And that would be very awkward for everyone involved.
Yeah, I mean, there are some people who I think this is kind of a small group who have simultaneously started saying this line, and it's kind of a way to claw back the Chomskyan strategy, which is to just channel all of the rage about this into something that isn't true. Like, there's some economic capitalist, plot here or something like that, but also, I mean, even if you say Washington, like, it simply doesn't make any sense as an argument, because, like, as we were saying, many of the people even within the U.S. Army, including people who were handpicked to be yes men by Trump, have dissented on this because it's so obviously irrational. Now you have Iran committed totally to sweeping U.S.-Israel out of the entire civilizational space, the whole continent.
Yeah.
And you have screwed any chance of having some fantasy war with China. And you have made enemies with your only allies, which is in NATO. I mean, for example, I saw some articles were published about what might have happened if they had actually gone in and tried to, like, invade Greenland. And, loads of European powers are now basically moving toward kind of enemy status with America, If you look at Spain not allowing the Moron base to be used in certain ways and stuff like that. So, I mean, none of it makes any rational sense, but we have all the evidence that the one issue fanatical Israeli rationale works, right? That actually tracks as an explanation. It is logical, it is evidence-based, and it has all of the facts on its side. But like I say, I think this is just like, because I was wondering, why haven't they got a handle on the narrative here? Like, I don't really see them, Trump is all over the place. One day he's saying that there isn't even a war. Like, he said that like 2 days ago or something. There isn't even a war and it's just the fake news media. Like, whoa, what is he even talking about? But this is the first time when I saw this just in the last day or two, I was like, okay, this is actually kind of, I can sense that there's like a somewhat thought through plan here with this narrative, where they're basically trying to just reimpose the taboo. Everyone knows all of this information that shows that shows that their argument is wrong, but you get these kind of, these whips, like these people who are like really the head witch hunters during the woke era, right? Who are very good at really shaming people and terrifying people with this kind of moral shaming, that they're trying that a bit of that again. They're going, yeah, you're not saying what we think you're saying, are you? Just to scare people. But the other thing, though, is that those people who are pushing this narrative are still kind of a minority. They were people who were supposed to get big careers in the Bernie presidency, right? And they're pissed off about that. But they're really well connected. But actually, a lot of sort of rank and file, like leftists, right, like true believing leftists, actually haven't been that bad on this question. And I think one of the reasons is that, like you were touching on, Malcolm, in the Nuremberg Christianity thing, the whole basis of kind of like white Western leftism basically is there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither bond nor free, there is neither male nor female, for ye are all one in Jesus Christ. The whole idea was like, no, you can't be tribalistic. You're not allowed. Yeah. And so this battle basically between sort of European Gentiles and Jews has been going on for a very long time. And leftists, like white leftists, like really, really believed in this religion. Like, if you see a white person being tribalistic, you have to kill them. That's what they believe, right? Antifa, that's the whole basis of it. And so they have this fanatical religion, and then one day they wake up and realize that that's actually all kind of bullshit, because the tribalism is allowed.
Yeah, I mean, I came up in the left, and, you know, we were always taught that, you know, anti-Semitism is the socialism of fools and so on. And I mean, I still believe that. I mean, I sort of developed my political consciousness following like a lot of American intellectual milieus, and like half of the people inside those were Jews. Like, you have Noam Chomsky, you have Finkelstein, I have the Law and Disorder guys. This is like really sort of old true lore, but but the issue though after October 7th is, and we talked about this before we started recording, but it's like that scene in the Thing where suddenly like the guy you thought was your friend explodes into this like tentacle monster or whatever. Like he's just wearing the skin suit, where it's like, okay, Chomsky, he's talking about how it's all the white Americans' fault, like it's the capitalist logic of the U.S. empire. And then he's, you know, hanging out with Steve Bannon and, you know, Wall Street, fascist, right-wing Steve Bannon, not exactly an anarchist, right?
Must be a better hang than Amy Goodman, though.
Yeah,
saying
sure.
Latinx every fucking 5 minutes.
Yeah, sure. But it's like, you have him hanging out with Steve Bannon and like helping Epstein defeat the scurrilous lies about him abusing girls or whatever. And like you read the emails and they're all laughing about the Goyim. And it's like, you kind of realize that a lot of this shit was just fake. But that, to me, like, that doesn't really matter. I'll still keep believing in universalism. And if you say, well, I can't be a universalist because as a Jew, my loyalty is to my people, and I will abandon all of these things, like, to sort of pursue the ethnic interests of my group at the expense of all others. I mean, okay, sad to see you go, but we're still, like, you're not going to bring me along with you into, like, worshipping the Avengers of Amalek or whatever the fuck.
Also the one thing that I've been thinking about a lot, and it kind of relates again to your Nuremberg article, is that after I read Tom Holland's book Dominion, I was left with two questions. One of them was, why is leftism, let's just call it white leftism, right? Because it's like, it's a little different if you go to Latin America or Africa or whatever. We're talking about the leftism that we know in the West. And the kind of leftism you see in DSA or something like that, right? So the first question was, why is leftism so similar to Christianity? Like, you could say there's a kind of an echo or something, but that seemed like not a good enough answer to me. Like, they're so similar, they're so structurally identical, that there has to be a deep causal origin that keeps forcing things into this shape, if you know what I mean. And then the other second question is, why, if this is the doctrine of meekness, why has it produced such strength? And that's so Elon Musk and people like that, right, have this argument that Western people are self-hating, and they what is that term they always use? I can't remember. It's like, basically they sabotage themselves because they're so full of self-hatred and this kind of thing.
They have like toxic empathy.
Right. And so they're meek, and it's like this Nietzschean analysis, right? They have this meekness doctrine. That's why the West is falling and all this kind of stuff. But that doesn't make any sense, because, if you take this, that basically why has the West been successful then, right? If it's just full of meekness and, this Nietzschean theory kind of. So what I think is something like this. organized Christianity begins with Constantine, and he has to cohere a completely chaotic, falling apart, multi-ethnic empire, a late empire. And by enforcing, like that quote that I just read from the Bible, by enforcing this idea that we are all one, you are all one, there's no men and women, there's no Greek or Jew, everyone is one. You're creating a almost like what Ataturk tried to do. Like you're creating a new identity that is an imperial polity identity. So the fundamentals of both Christianity and leftism, white leftism, I'm just calling it, is unity and equality and universalism.
Yeah.
And so fast forward to something like Lincoln, right? All of the mottos are about unity, a perfect union, e pluribus unum, all that stuff. Why? Because these are the elements of expansive statecraft that are required, you know? And so that unity actually is, that unity and equality is a strength. Like right-wingers often think, like the really stupid, unreflective right-wingers, okay, there's the smart right-wing people, obviously, but they think that if you're just tribalistic and you just put your boot on everyone underneath you, then everything will be fine. But like, then you'd have to explain, why is it that the society that you revere, which is Western civilization, has been very successful under the doctrine of unity, equality, universalism? It's because this is either by conscious creation or by kind of naturally emerging out of statecraft. It's a doctrine that enables statecraft. It enables large-scale or imperial statecraft. It allows people to get along. It allows people to have a united identity, even if it's across ethnic and racial lines. And so in that way, right-wingers are sort of trying to attack the very thing that is the basis of Western success, of the success of Christendom, we'll say, that became leftism. And so on the one hand, you might say, well, are we all just a bunch of idiots? Like there's this like really radical, murderous, like, racial politics going on right, under our noses, and we didn't even really realize it. And we're believing in all this Santa Claus stuff, right? About everyone is the same and whatnot. Well, on the other hand, I think, maybe there is actually, maybe the Western Christian view is the wiser one, right? Long term.
Yeah.
Because it enables human beings to get along, to work together, to have, it kind of diffuses conflict. There's all this like stuff buried within the architecture of it that's quite wise. And then in the short term, it seems to make sense. Oh yeah, fuck everyone else. I just care about my tribe. That seems to make sense, right? But ultimately, maybe that's why there is this cycle of rise and fall and a lot of, and periods of anti-Semitism, right?
Yeah, and I think it's actually really beautiful that you brought this up, because it kind of squares or it like brings us full circle back to what we started talking about, like the military dimension, because you hinted here at like maybe there is some sort of strength to this, that like these rightoids and like the sort of then pensant like wisdom here dismisses. If you want to get like the closest to like actual, like real flourishing, like Christian ethics, morality, worldview today, like on a sort of state level, you're going to have to turn to like Hezbollah and Iran, like Shia Islam, like for historical reasons. And I need to spend like the summer reading up on this stuff. But like for historical reasons, like Shia Islam compared to the majority Sunni are much more concerned with not what like the letter of Islamic law says, like what the rules are, but like what is the spirit of the rules? Like what is the point? And so they're much more there are two terms here, like exegesis and then the other one where it's like you are more concerned with sort of distilling the point of the religion rather than like rules lawyering. But essentially, like you see in Shia Islam right now, and you see in the Iranian response, the kind of massive strength that you have, like from this perspective of like universalism and like this sort of you have to suffer for the common good. Like we celebrate the people, like the Shia Muslim concept of a martyr, for example, is anyone who dies for the collective is considered to be a martyr. So like if you're a fireman and you run into a building and you save like the children and the kittens there, and then you die from smoke inhalation, like you are a martyr. We have like a much more narrow interpretation like today in the West of what a martyr is. That's someone who dies for like religious truth rather than like truth more generally. But still, I mean, we still like appreciate those figures almost as much as Shia Muslims do. But like you kind of like the major miscalculation of this war is just that like nobody in the Pentagon actually and nobody in the White House actually thought that these things give a society real strength. They thought if we kill the leaders, these people are going to run away scared. But like there was this incredibly telling episode in Tehran that played out like a week or 10 days ago, where you have this like these large pro-government demonstrations, and the Israelis are like bombing Tehran at the same time. And so there's this like concrete shrapnel or whatever created by one of the bomb attacks that flies and hits a woman who's carrying like the Iranian flag. Like it hits her in the head. She dies instantly. And she like her blood just covers the flag. And what happens is that like the people around her, like some people take care of the body and so on. And later on they build like a shrine to her honor in that the spot where she died. But like the rest, like they're waving this really like blood covered Iranian flag. And like cheering, and they keep going. Like they aren't afraid of the bombs at all. Because like to die for the collective, to be martyred, like that is something that like if you shirk away from that, you aren't even a real human being at that point. You're like a miserable animal. And a society that has that attitude, that's a strong society. You watch like the videos of Iranian missile attacks during the 12-day war. And like the Israelis are just, they're breaking down, they're crying. They're like, how can they do this? This is so unfair. Like they're just having sort of mental breakdowns and they're stealing from each other in the shelters and so on. And so,
Can
like,
I just say,
yeah,
briefly, my favorite Schadenfreude side plot here is that they were spreading all these fake anti-Semitism stories to keep the Gaza genocide going, and the New York Post was going around and making up stories of Jewish people getting attacked in New York. It was all fake, but a not insignificant number of Jewish people fled New York because it was too dangerous to be Jewish here, and now they're in Israel getting bombed every day.
Yeah.
So, great decision making.
Yeah, but I mean, like, the Israelis just say, like, strength is like Genghis Khan is stronger than Jesus Christ.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, you're seeing the power of Christ on the streets of Tehran. The whole, like, you can only kill my body, but you can't actually, like, what does that matter at the end of the day? And then you have the strength of Genghis Khan on the streets of Tel Aviv. And like, it's so fucking obvious which side is stronger. These Americans, they go like, the Iranians, we're just gonna bomb them for 24 hours, and because they're cowards who just want to sit at home and shark off to OnlyFans, just like us. accept like they're racially inferior, like they're just gonna turn tail and run. And it's like, this is not the attitude that built America. Like George Washington wasn't some fucking Pareto, optimal, self-interested Ayn Randian figure. He was a guy who's like, okay, if you have to shoot me, like if the Brits shoot me, I fully expect my soldiers to take the American flag with my blood on it and keep marching. That's what Americans, like that's what makes us, that's like the point of our freedom struggle. If I die, if the guy after me dies, pick up the bloody flag, keep on walking. And the Americans at that point would pick up the bloody flag and they would keep on walking and they would keep on fighting. But today, that is gone. We have become Israelis in the West. And that, like, we think like Israelis, we talk like Israelis, we threaten like other countries like Iran, like Israelis, and it doesn't work. Like, we can't scare them, we can't overpower them, because at the end, we're fighting for nothing, and they are fighting for something.
Yeah, I saw a lot of bluster about, we sent Ayatollah Khomeini to the 72 virgins. It's like, God, we really are the fucking OnlyFans society, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting if you listen to...
Can I just make one short point here? Like, you know, people are to defend Trump here, to defend Donald Trump and going to war with Israel. They're saying that, like, some people, some who are deep in the cope are saying, he was so afraid of the Israelis killing him. Because that's like the thing implied by that guy who quit and so on, that they're planning to assassinate him and or his family. I saw Martyr made the same point. So that's why he sent all of these American kids to his death in order to protect his own life at like 80 years old. Like, that's where we are. And then we're mocking the fucking Iranians for having a leader who says, well, if my death is going to help the country, I gladly die. Like, don't you see how fucked up that is? Like, how...
Yes, and it also shows how, you know, it's just, I think there is a pretty much universal human ability to understand the concept of nobility in one form or another. And it's so obvious, you know, that it's not just that they are noble, it's that people who are noble rise to the top of that system. And ours is exactly the opposite. Like, it has completely weeded out and selected out anyone with these impulses, you know, and that is not what I was going to say earlier. Is like, the early America, you know, they really tried to instill, they were like obsessed with Greco-Roman ideas and culture, and they tried to instill this idea that civic virtue is all about self-sacrifice. You have to put aside your petty interests and give something up. And then later on in the kind of Lincoln's stage of America, it was like a fanatical egalitarian universalism. And, you know, that's something a little different. It's unique to that kind of Enlightenment tradition, but it's still very inspiring, right? You're fighting for all mankind, sort of. And that's totally gone now. It's funny because it's like, on the one hand, we've come out of this woke era where there's a kind of a really, a really shitty, ignoble version of that, right? Which is, I want my little career in a think tank or academia or an NGO. It's this like elite conflict thing, but it's not really believed. Like, they don't really believe, like, you know, like I would die to liberate all mankind or something like that, you know? And so there's just no belief there. There's no power of an ethnic thing, right? There's no tribal, there's no like American race, right? There's no tribal war to fight. But there's also not like a beautiful idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the fact that people would try to defend an 80-year-old man saying like, well, he had to go to war because he feared for his own life. Like, nigga, you're 80 years old. How, like, you have 14 months left, bro. And you picked this, like, nobody forced you to become president. You could have just said, well, I don't want to be the leader of the American people. Like, saying, okay, well, kill me, I don't care. Like, that's the fucking bare minimum you're supposed to do in that office. You can't say, well, 10,000, 100,000 Americans died, but I got to live 9 months longer. So what did you expect me to do? Like, it's so sick. Yeah.
On that point, so the Joe Kent thing, I mentioned this in my article, but basically, as you're saying, Joe Kent suggests that Trump and his family, he feared that his family would be assassinated by Israel or whatever. But of course, neither he nor Tucker Carlson, they talk for 2 hours. They don't mention Jeffrey Epstein. And I think it's because the political right that's turning against Israel is in a delicate spot right now, because Donald Trump's approval rating among Republicans is still 95, 98%, whatever ridiculous number. So they have to do kind of a good SAR, bad boyers type of thing, where they say, you know, Trump is being misled by the Israelis. He, of course, is not being blackmailed by Jeffrey Epstein or whatever. But it is quite interesting to me that Joe Kent and Tucker Carlson and some others on the right are willing to come out and say Israel is the problem. Whereas Bernie Sanders, Gavin Newsom, they're all trying to do this. Oh, if just they got rid of Netanyahu, it's Netanyahu is so evil, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I'd be curious, both of your thoughts as to, it seems like once the gas prices bite, maybe the Trump cult on the right will break, maybe it won't, but it's interesting to me that Democrats are still unable to actually criticize Israel directly.
Oh, and what they actually want is a war with Russia. Like, I watched, I occasionally I find it fascinating to tune into Bill Maher's show.
Oh yeah,
because it's like it's almost like they get together. It's like a planning show. Like, they're like, what do we do about, hey, how do we advance this kind of like 90s liberal styled neoconism, and so they always have like a right-wing person and a left-wing. But basically, if I watched it, and it was like this woman was just saying everything Trump does is great and Trump is the best, and you know, we're winning and etc. We're winning against Islam or something like that, stupid neocon stuff. But then the liberal, who was meant to be giving the other side, was like, this is distracting us from a war with Russia, which is what we should be doing. So it's like the factions are basically, the liberals are dying to kill everyone in Russia. This kind of small, I would say kind of like waspy faction want to have a war with China, and then the Jewish faction basically want to have a war with everyone in the Middle East. And like, none of it's very, you know, there's no good option there, you know.
Yeah, there was this guy on Twitter who has a bunch of followers who posts about like industrial policy and so on. He made a post like, dude, we're never gonna win a war with China at this rate. Like, we have such big problems. Like, we need to, it's fucking over. And I'm like, film at 11, American, upon finding himself in like a stupid, pointless war that destroys the nation, goes, oh, this is terrible. How will we have our bigger, stupider, more pointless war that will destroy the nation even more? Like, we won't be able to have this now. It's like, he didn't like that, so he blocked me for it. But it's like, that's like the acme of criticism of this shit among like the professional class, where it's like, how will we be able to destroy the nation in an apocalyptic war against China now that we're too weak, and like we're kind of destroying the nation in a kind of apocalyptic war with Iran? Like, we won't be able to do empire. Like, what is your complaint here exactly? Like, is the problem really that like the Americans are gonna have it too good because they only have to deal with the fallout from this smaller war? Like, there is kind of this absurdity to like the American empire in that like nobody likes it, but people still talk with each other like it's its collapse is like the worst thing ever because we won't be able to have more forever wars. Like, we're having a small forever war now that is really bad because we can't have a bigger forever war. Like, do you like or do you not like forever wars? No, I hate them. Okay, so why is it bad if we can't have the next forever war? If this is the last forever war America will ever have, isn't that great? But, and yeah, in theory it is, but like these people are kind of grafted to the imperial, like the imperial government. Like, they are court eunuchs, and there's not going to be a lot of court eunuchs around in 10 years. And this is kind of the problem for someone like Mary Weiss. I mean, like, where will she go? Like, where will these people go? I mean, at the end of the day, there are people who think that Agent Tucker, like, he's not an agent for Qatar or anything, or Russia or anything like that. He's an agent for like the American WASPs. Like, Anna Kasparian is more right than she even realizes, in that the Goyim are waking up. Like, there's this counter-revolution being planned by the American deep state to, like, okay, give us back the keys to the car now, please. Like, America in the 18th century, like, it was run by Christians, not by Jews. And so it's time for us to come back and reclaim our birthright. There might be some truth to that. I don't think it's anything organized. But, like, if we just look at, like, the broad, like, on a historical time scale, it was never sustainable to have this tiny minority with like this crusader state, essentially, like sucking up resources to Jerusalem. Like, that shit was never gonna last. And we're now in a situation where, like, the rearguard action is just trying to, like, please don't mention the fact that Marco Rubio said that, like, U.S. foreign policy is controlled by Israel. Like, he's the fucking Secretary of State. Like, he, if anyone would know about, like, U.S. foreign policy, that's his entire job.
Right. They just tell you he was taken out of context, and then they show the entire clip, and you can see that he was not taken out of context.
Yeah, but it's like, just stop caring about it. Just go back to watching OnlyFans and leave politics to, like, real people. Like, that's their attitude. But it's not gonna work because, again, once America ceases to be an empire, and that shit is coming closer than anyone, like, faster than anyone is actually, like, planning for. Like, if we think about how we discussed the energy markets, where it's like, we knocked out the pricing mechanism, and so in like 2 weeks, a bunch of countries are not going to have any fuel left whatsoever. And then people are going to wake up and go, oh, wow, maybe this Strait of Hormuz thing is kind of a problem. I mean, it's the same thing with, like, imperial collapse in general. Like, once it's over, that's when you're going to read about it in the newspapers. Like, a year after the U.S. empire is gone, you're going to go, like, the U.S. empire might be disappearing. And so this normalcy bias that people have, like, it's truly destructive. Like, it's if people didn't have it, maybe you could save any part of the empire. But people, again, they're only gonna react to it after it's already happened.
Well, it seems to me like the Jews kind of gave the WASP ruling class what they deserved for what they did to the Irish.
Yeah. That's
but,
how it goes.
You are right, Angela. Like, the fact that this war started on Purim, and Israel is keeping the El Aqsa Mosque closed. They've hinted that
and the Church
it might
of
be
the Holy Sepulchre as well.
Yeah. They've hinted that it might be damaged by Iranian missiles. It's like, these people are so fucking psychopathic and retarded. Like, you can't imagine that this actually drives people. But I think it's very likely that they're going to blow up El Aqsa, and then they've got to sacrifice a red heifer to build the third temple. So, you know, Barry Weiss is lucky she doesn't have red hair. But But, it's just, it's crazy because, yes, this does actually motivate people. Yes, there is an ethnic Jewish mafia, and I think rank and file people on the left or just generally do recognize this. Like, 20 somethings on TikTok are using the word goyim and goy cattle in place of normie now. But there is like this kind of contingent of gatekeepers on the left that can essentially say nothing except, yes, it's real, but it's kind of very scary and dangerous if you talk about it, because it's going to, unleash these forces of historical anti-Semitism, and we're all going to do Nazism again.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, people... One of the things I've been sort of amused by, I should say, when I was writing this, like, Nuremberg Christianity thing, it's like... for the longest time, you had all of these people like doing Holocaust denial and so on, like Holocaust revisionism. They were saying stuff like, well, like if you look at how these gas chambers are constructed, I don't think it's realistic to like gas these so many people in them, blah, 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 blah. Like they're trying to attack the Holocaust. Like if you're a Holocaust denier, that's not actually like an accusation of like having an empirical position. That's just like not being a team player, essentially. And I always thought like these people were kind of naive in trying to attack something. Like that's like saying, well, Jesus didn't actually die or resurrect at like the precise location of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So like you Christians, you should just stop being Christian. Like that's not how this shit works, man. But at the other end of it, I do tend to think that like if you want to give these gatekeepers like they're being rational here in the sense that if you're bringing back like echoes of the Holocaust or whatever, like the moment you reduce the Holocaust, like the moment you start talking about like did 6 million die, did 4.320 million die, like the problem is not that something magical happens once you go up to 6 million. The magic depends on this being like a mythological event. And what the gatekeepers now are afraid of, and not just with the Holocaust, but with basically every sort of aspect of our understanding of history since World War II. It's basically like you will desacralize this stuff. Like you will reduce the Holocaust to just like the Armenian genocide but bigger, and you won't have these churches and rituals, and like nobody will feel some sort of religious fervor, just as they don't feel some religious fervor like reading about the Armenian Holocaust or the Armenian genocide. And like at that point our last line of defense will be gone. So I do think that like you're seeing the signs already, I think, of Zoomers, like the sort of sacralization of stuff doesn't work anymore. Like the best example of this, where I really started sensing that like, okay, something has gone wrong here, was the TikTok trend. And I think this is one of the big reasons they actually had to sell TikTok, where like the letter by Osama bin Laden to America became this huge trend online. And The Guardian, who had published that, actually removed the letter from Osama bin Laden because the kids were reading it, and they said, like, they had some sort of, like, okay, you were probably coming here to read Osama bin Laden's words that we published in the interest of free information, but, like, we don't really think that you should be reading this because it might give you a skewed view of history, so we decided for your own benefit to delete it so you can't read it. And, like, if you think about for us, millennials, like the whole war on terror, Al-Qaeda, like if you said, yeah, I think that Osama bin Laden was acting rationally, and he had made some good points in this letter about U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. Like imagine saying that in 2010. That's like, you know, doing like building an altar to Moloch or whatever in like 14th century Germany and just saying like, I don't worship God, I worship Moloch. Like you can't do that. Like you can't, you have just said like you are outside the human tribe. Like you are no longer an actual person. Like you are a human-shaped animal walking around. But like for the Zoomers, they didn't have that programming, so they could just say, "Oh man, like I've been blackpilled. I realized that Osama bin Laden was the good guy all along." And I think that stuff like that is going to happen with like a lot of these like sacral myths. Like you're seeing this battle with Winston Churchill. Like the battlefront of Winston Churchill, I think, is like even more important than like far more important, I think, than the battle over like how many people died in the Holocaust. Because once you say that Winston Churchill is not like this apostle of truth or whatever, like you're kind of destroying the moral universe of the West. And so I think that like people like Tucker Carlson has been active, like saying like he invited over Martin Maid, who really dressed down Winston Churchill and said he was a bad leader and he was doing like his kind of politics was just destructive to the West. And like you have all of these boomers saying like, you can't heckin' say that, you can't be mean to my hecking Winston Chungus.
My comfort imperialist.
Yeah. This is blasphemy. And yes, it is. That is exactly what it is. It is blasphemy. But the blasphemy here is spreading, because people no longer believe in this entire moral universe.
And I do think it is just like the printing press effect. Like, I mean, because I was thinking ultimately it is, here I stand, I can do no other. You know something is true. So no matter how much, so when they can only say, we're going to punish you, we're going to destroy your reputation, we're going to destroy your career, we're going to hurl like moral insults at you, you're still left going, okay, but I still know that this thing is true. Like, and there's kind of nothing you can do with that. You know, there's a kind of a, that's why I was saying, like, I think that, the public discourse is incredibly silly. And so it doesn't really feel like we're having an enlightenment, but it is one of a kind, because the internet is like the printing press, and there's just simply too much information out there. Like I was saying earlier about how we all used to look at like the new atheists, right, and think, oh, they're articulate, they're smart, they're all Oxford educated, and this kind of thing, or they were perceived that way. Whereas now it's just so obvious that this was a propaganda campaign for the Middle East wars. That it's sort of unbelievable that we could ever have not known that, and even to a young person now, it's kind of probably unbelievable that anyone could be so naive.
Yeah.
I remember I was thinking also an interesting kind of point here. The TikTok one is a really good one, but I was thinking also about Adam Curtis, because one of the themes in Adam Curtis's documentaries was basically that our reality is shaped by statecraft, by these very high up, architects of emotion and ideas. And so, he popularized, for example, the awareness of the CIA funding art movements and journals and things like that. And it seemed like sort of slightly on the edge of conspiracy theory stuff almost when he did it. Like it seemed like a very paranoid kind of approach to the world. But now it's just like, that is so, everyone knows that now, everyone understands that this is kind of where ideas come from. And this is how culture is actually shaped. And so there is a kind of like a hermeneutics of suspicion or whatever, right? Everyone immediately looks at a phenomena that happens in politics or the media, and their first thought process to analyze it is, this one. It's basically that you have to take a cynical look at it, and you have to assume that there's a top-down, rational kind of statecraft project here, or some other top-down thing. And so the idea that you would think that something like the New Atheists, right, that you would just take that innocently in the way people used to, that's impossible now.
Yeah.
So something like, for example, back in the New Atheist days, they would say, we're fighting Islam, and you can only wear miniskirt in Tel Aviv and this kind of thing. But now everyone can just go, okay, but we know there's actually a very clear historical record and a fact that anyone can look up that creating this kind of Islamism was a project to get rid of secular nationalism, developmentalism.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so on and so forth. So in other words, we just have more knowledge, and these things just don't work anymore.
Yeah, and there's also this interesting, like I've pointed this out in other contexts, but like the funniest thing about like counter-jihad narratives and like all of this stuff that was so clearly seeded by the Israelis, and that you had people from like the CPAC to the New Atheists and so on, like trying to create a civilizational conflict with Islam. Like the picture they paint of what Islam really is, it's just anti-Semitism. It's straight up just anti-Semitism, and that's why it's so effective. Like you basically, the example I like to bring up here is the counter-jihadis are very concerned with the Muslim concept of taqiyya, which is basically, I think it's like Arabic for deception, but taqiyya, what it actually is as a doctrine is it like gives you, it's not about like moving to a place and living off welfare until you have like a critical mass where you can just subvert the political system. Because in the Prophet's time, like 600 AD, they didn't have fucking social security. Like you couldn't move to Normandy and say like, give me my housing here. Like, give me my council flat. Like, that's not how it worked. If you wanted to spread your religion at that time, you either spread it through missionaries or you spread it through the sword. Same deal as Christianity. It either spread through missionaries or through the sword, or more commonly, a combination of both. What taqiyya is, it's a defensive doctrine where if you live in Spain and Queen Isabella says, okay, you and your family have to eat this bacon because we're testing to see whether people are Muslim, and if you refuse to eat the bacon, we're going to kill you. Like at that point, you are exempted from the religious taboo on eating pork because you are essentially engaging in some sort of deception to save your own life and the life of your family. And at that point, it's no longer haram. Like it's better if you just say, no, I'm a Muslim and I will die as a martyr, but like it's a realistic, practical religion, so people realize that everyone can't be a martyr saint here. But counter-jihadis basically talk about this, like, okay, well, Muslims, they say one thing, they have one face for us, like the non-Muslims, the Goyim, like the Muslims, they talk to the Goyim in one way, but then they like plan and they have another system, like moral universe that they themselves live in. And it's like, yeah, you're just talking about like Jews. Like you are just...
The other one, the other thing is they also used to say, the counter-jihad people always used to say, oh, it's because their religion is full of vengeance.
Yeah, right? I mean...
Yeah, the people smearing Roald Dahl fucking 40 years after his death.
Yeah.
What fault in the RAF?
Yeah, and there's also like super basic conceptions here, like, okay, well, these Muslims, they really hate Jesus. Like they are driven by this resentment towards Jesus. And that's why they're so dangerous. Like you let them into your society and then they're going to burn the churches down because they hate our Lord Jesus Christ. And it's like, again, you're just like, you're spinning a narrative that works so incredibly well on these fucking European boomers because you're just talking about the Jews, man. Like, that's it. If you said, like, I hate Jesus or the Prophet Isa, Alam Salaikum, like, if you went around saying, fuck Jesus, like, during the reign of the Islamic State, they would string you up. They would cut your head off. The places in the world where it is punishable by prison or by like corporal punishment to insult Jesus Christ, it's all Muslim countries. Because, I mean, for obvious reasons, Jesus is considered the like second most important prophet in Islam after the Prophet Muhammad. And though like Muslims don't have the same like metaphysics here, like they believe that the Prophet Isa was, like, they believe in immaculate conception. They believe that in some sort of like they don't believe he was the son of God because they think that is metaphysically impossible, but they do believe that he was immaculatively conceived through the power of God. Like, you can't insult him. That is not allowed. But it works on these boomers to think that, like, you have these people going around just hoping to make like the veneration of Christ illegal. Because, like, you ask fucking someone like Ben Shapiro, and he's like, yeah, he's burning in hell in excrement or whatever. Like, he was just a thief and a sorcerer and a charlatan. Like, so again, I find this quite amusing in a way, quite ironic, that like the counter-jihadist narrative, and like you really managed to mind break a lot of boomers with this sort of civilization of war against Islam slope by just taking the like 18th century screeds against Jews and saying, well, these are about Muslims actually.
Yeah. Because Islam is actually much more similar structurally to Christianity in that it's proselytizing and universalist.
Yeah.
Right? Like, anyone can become one.
Yeah, and like there are significant differences in terms of Islam, like de facto being kind of a ethnic religion at the start. Like, this is kind of one of the big dynamics in the Shia-Sunni split is that, like, the Shia are not Arabs. Like, these are the people who actually believe in, like, the letter of the religion, like what it says it's about. Like, it's about, like, the universal. Like, there is really no, for the first, like, generations, there is no real Muslim ummah in the sense that the Christians imagine. But like, this is created because people kind of realize, no, like, this is a good idea. Like, I don't accept that, like, Arabs are the only real Muslims. I think everyone can be a Muslim. So, like, they do have, at the end of the day, like, they take a different, like, historical route, but, like, particularly Shia Islam and Christianity aren't really that far apart in a lot of ways. And I think that, like, the more you start to learn about, like, Iran and so on, like, which Zoomers can, like, they aren't watching Mark Levin. So they have another vector for this, like, here I stand and I can do no other. Where, like, you can't sell them on this, like, counter-jihad boomer slog.
Did you both see that thousands of crows descended on the Tel Aviv skyline? and so, like, what if Netanyahu is, like, destined to fulfill the prophecy that no Israeli state will last more than 80 years God is actually real, and that's the whole reveal? The new atheists were just completely wrong start to finish.
Dude, like, before October 7th, like, less than a month before, like, an American, like, dual citizen tourist, like some Orthodox Jew living in New York or whatever, traveled over to Israel, and he smashed a statue of, like, the Wheel of Nemesis in like one of the museums in Israel because, like, this is against the Torah. So I mean, this is the collapse of Israel has been guarded by sort of divine prophecy from the beginning. Like they declared war on the gods, and if you do that, like things don't turn out well for you historically.
Thank you, specifically Catholic God. But I guess we should move towards the ending here, which would, I think a good way to do that would be to offer a few predictions about what we think might happen next. I'll just give a couple highlights. So the Iranians have rejected the Trump fake peace offer. The Iranians have said that they've given 5 conditions for a ceasefire. And an end to the war, a complete halt to aggression and assassinations by the enemy, the establishment of concrete mechanisms to ensure that the war is not reimposed on Iran, guaranteed and clearly defined payments of war damages and reparations, the end of the war across all fronts for all resistance groups involved throughout the region. That's very important that the Iranians are saying that we won't let Hezbollah twist in the wind. There's going to be a deal that includes both Iran and Hezbollah and the Houthis and everybody. And then lastly, Iran exercises sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz that's recognized, and it will remain Iran's natural and legal right, and it constitutes a guarantee for the implementation of the other parties' commitments, and basically their control of the Strait of Hormuz must be recognized. And then Congresswoman Nancy Mace, she just came out of a briefing. She says that she's adamantly opposed to a U.S. invasion with ground troops, so that seems to be the suggestion that they're moving towards that, maybe invading one of the islands. But the Iranians have said that if we try the bullshit with the, Karg Island or one of the other islands, the Iranians have said that they very much might invade the UAE or Bahrain, try to take over the coastline there. I imagine, as we were saying at the start, that after the markets close on Friday, there will be some attempt at something. I was speculating about maybe they'll try to attract the infrastructure, but I think, Malcolm, you're probably right that they won't be that stupid. But I guess, where do you see this going?
I mean, I think that on the military level, like, we are going to see a decline in the air war. Like, the air war can't continue because, 1, munitions are being depleted, 2, U.S. forces are being evicted from all of these bases. Like, the U.S. just retreated entirely from Iraq, apart from like the Kurdish-controlled areas. They still have like a toehold there, but like the Iraqi resistance just threw the Americans out. And finally, like, you can't keep these planes in the air for very long before they start falling apart. So the actual kinetic warfare, the conflict is going to lose speed, and all of the hopes about Iran, like, they can't pace their missile launches because they're animals. Like, no, they can. So the Iranians will be able to keep communicating an image of the Americans threw all they had at us, and it didn't really move the needle. Which is why I think they're betting, like, everyone I talk to just says that, like, the thinking inside Washington is that they have this Hail Mary pass where, like, the underpants known logic of, we take some random Iranian territory and then question mark, we get a peace with honor. They don't really examine what happens during the question mark thing. But, like, what's actually going to happen if you try to take Iranian territory is the Iranians are going to say, well, this war isn't going to end until all of the Americans on this territory are dead. And then they're going to start killing them. And the war will continue for as long as it takes to kill them all. That's not, like, in the American plans, which is why I think that, like, the metal level of this war is that, like, we are going to see moves on the chessboard to forestall some sort of narrative collapse. So this invasion is part of it, like a land invasion is part of it, because it will allow, for a couple of days at least, will allow the Americans to say, look, we still have the strategic initiative here. But just like with all of the manipulation of the energy markets, like, eventually hard reality is going to set in. So I do think that like the period of us going like who will win, like will Iran buckle under the pressure or not, like that period is over. Like that you could have those questions, those debates for the first 10, 14 days of the war. But we're past that now. So now it's just a question of like what happens with the US political system to basically make the war impossible to continue. And I think that like one of the things that might happen is that you will start seeing videos in 4K of FPV drones, you know, American soldiers praying to Ronald McDonald or whatever the fuck, like doing their last rites as the FPV drone descends upon them. And like a lot of Americans had this insane bloodthirst watching Russian troops in their last 4 or 5 seconds of their lives before the drone blew them up. I don't think they're really ready to watch Americans sort of debase themselves in their final moments and like have that shit posted all over the world over social media. I think that like that will have hugely unpredictable effects. And I do think that like we're not likely to see like a general's coup against Donald Trump or whatever, but what we are probably likely to see are mutinies within the US military. I don't think that, like, people have this, oh, the US military, like, these are the super elite fighting forces, like, these people, they're like fucking the Borg plus Spartans in 300. No. Watch a video of, like, US Army grunts, and they're like, I'm here for the free food, I'm here because I don't want to be homeless, I'm here to pay for college. You already have articles in the media saying like morale is really low. Captains are having to deal with the troops coming to them and asking them point blank, like, why are you sending us to die for Israel? Like, that's the language being used. Like, we are just pawns. You're going to send us in without the plan and we're all going to die because like nobody on the top of the chain of command has any fucking idea what we're even doing here. You can't have many botched operations where it's like, we didn't really realize they would hit us with missiles. Sorry, 800 people died, but the next wave, we're hoping they will have run out of missiles. So just rush up the beaches, and maybe the Iranians won't fire missiles because they'll be out. And it's like, yeah, but what if they're not out of missiles? Like, you can only have like 1 or 2 waves of that. Like, don't worry about it. Before people say, no, I'm not going to be wave number 3 or 4. Like, the Persians are not running out of arrows. I'm sorry. So, like, mutinies, if there's a land invasion, I would put the chance of that happening over 50%. Like, it only takes a couple of military disasters before, like, the chain of command starts breaking down for the US military at this point.
And I guess I'm just curious, Malcolm, are you stockpiling fuel, or is there anything people can do to protect themselves from the collapse of all of Western civilization?
I mean, I'm not stockpiling fuel because I don't have a car, nigga. Like, I live in Sweden, so I walk to places or maybe take the train. I mean, if you're an American, people say like Europe is going to be much more screwed by this, but I don't really think that's the case. I think the Americans are way, way worse. Just how car-dependent society is, and just how the lack of social solidarity and the lack of like extended families and so on, like that's gonna be rough, man. So
most of the population can't access basic things they need to survive without a car, without fuel in a car. That's not true of Europe and of much of the world. Like, you know, I know that like actually Iran is like very, very densely urban. So is Russia. So is a lot of Asia. And but you know that something is, because there is this idea. I remember, Malcolm, when you first started coming on, and there would be some people who doubted you, and they would say, oh, he's just getting carried away with this thing on Twitter, right? Everyone on Twitter is looking at they're doom scrolling all day and they're getting carried away and stuff like that. But that it's real when you're actually doing things in your own life. You know what I mean? In terms of what do you do with your money, what currency is going to have more value, and so on. And I did purchase a second freezer.
That's good.
Just the other day. Now, of course, if the energy goes out, then the freezer's no good, right? But you know, when you start doing things like that, because I'm not like that at all. Like I've never done a single thing, you know, to like prepare. I'm not one of those people. This is the only time I've ever done this in my life. But yeah, I mean, you know, I think people, there will be starvation actually, in much of the world. We're talking about the West, but I mean, there will be places, you know, due to, you know, just complex logistical things and so forth, that where people will die of hunger as a direct result of this, very possibly.
And all of those places, like, they will not just experience like humanitarian crises, but like this will also change the geopolitical chessboard. So like these countries, once they come out of the crisis, are going to be much more tightly aligned with like Russia and China and so on. Like the empire is just over. And it's going to be interesting to see, like, our biggest problem in the West, in one sense, it's kind of psychological. Like, people have this everything was forever until it was no more mentality. And, like, when it is no more, you're standing there like, I'm reminded of the intro to like old boomer slot video game, like Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, where it's like they just plop you out here like a naked baby in the woods. Like you become a vampire and like nobody explains anything and you're almost executed, and then you're just left to wander in some fucking alley in Los Angeles. They're like, okay, what
it's
do I do now?
Angela's not in the gamer covenant, because that's a great reference, Malcolm.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of
You assume I'm not.
Yeah, like
she guards her privacy well. She could just be a 80-hour-a-week gamer for all we know.
Yeah, I mean, like we in the West, we're gonna be the proverbial naked baby in the woods here for a while, as people try to sort of adapt their brains to figure out, okay, but what are we, like, without global American liberalism or whatever? What are we if we can't talk about the Holocaust as this magical mythological thing that like created morality? Like, what morality will we have? What are we if Winston Churchill wasn't this fucking apostle of righteousness or whatever, but was just an incredibly flawed politician, like a human being? And that answer, it's gonna take a while. I think for some people, like, they will be able to answer this by returning to older answers, which I think are still true. Yeah. Ergo Christianity. Others, I think they'll just drink themselves to death or join some sort of cult.
You know, it is interesting. I mean, so as a sociological experiment, I'm curious to see it, though I'm sure it'll be a disaster. But the United States did have rationing during World War I and World War II. And there was a much more developed and shared national identity there. There were campaigns about shared sacrifice and everything. So what happens when suddenly we have rationing again after 40 years of Reaganist individualism, where everybody's out for themselves and the leaders are looting everything and insider trading on everything? You know, it seems like a recipe for complete disaster, but it seems like, yes, the United States is going to have rationing again, but under completely different circumstances than in the past.
Yeah. It's interesting, too, that whenever something bad happens, Americans immediately go, oh, buy a gun. It's like, so you want to just start shooting people?
Yeah.
But can I just say as well, just so people don't think I'm completely nuts, on the freezer thing, the freezer that I actually have is a little dinky one at the top of the fridge, which holds like 2 pizzas or something. So it's like, I can't put anything in there. So I need to be able to, you know, if I can't even... Yeah, so that's like I'm not completely insane. I just want to have a bit of food.
I think you're being a bit too cautious here. Like the line at which you cross from prudence into insanity is if you start like planning like Amerikaners to become a gas wolf and just like you start raiding your neighbors for diesel, and you have like this underground storage tank where you will take all the stolen diesel and become like a diesel warlord. Like that is prudent, but like people aren't willing to accept that yet, so they will call you crazy for being a gas wolf. But like a freezer, that's completely fine. Like that's just being a reasonable human being at this point.
Well, I'm hopeful. Well, I'm not hopeful, but I'm trying desperately to rebuild some sort of shared identity within America, because the individualist stuff is going to be a real nightmare and disaster if society breaks down and we're all kind of still on this collective delusion that it should be every man for himself. And if you can't figure out how to if you can't hustle your way out of the breakdown of Western civilization, that's because you're a failure.
Yeah. And like, yeah,
go ahead.
I just saw something come up here in the feed, which is, I think, indicative of kind of where we are as a society. You remember that bridge in Baltimore that the ship crashed into, like the Key Bridge, that crashed down 2 years ago? They haven't rebuilt it, and they're barely even trying. Like, it's just... They've removed the rubble, but there's no building going on. And when people said like, "Oh well, we're the rich West, it's gonna be finished in a couple of weeks," and like it's probably never gonna be finished. And yeah, we really have lost something here. Like you can't really blame the Muslims or the immigrants or whatever. Like there is just.
Yeah.
We have lost the strength for weakness here. We have lost, we started celebrating Genghis Khan rather than Jesus Christ, and then we can't even rebuild a bridge.
Right.
Well, listeners, if you have any ideas about things we should be stockpiling for the apocalypse,
move to Spain.
Types of gun. Yeah, that's right. How to get EU citizenship, types of guns to buy, bug out bags you like. I saw they're selling like an AI computer that works offline and has like all of Wikipedia and a bunch of survival stuff. So I'm sure that'll be a big booming business. But me personally, you can find me seanpmccarthy.substack.com, angelanagel.substack.com. But Malcolm and Angela, is there anything else you'd like to advertise or say to the people before we go?
No.
No. I had actually, no, forget it. I'm gonna have some stuff coming out on this, like this war pretty soon on Unheard. But if you want to listen to like a more technical analysis here of the war with Iran, you can probably listen to the special episode of Multipolarity, I guess.
All right. Well, we want to thank you, the listener, for being with us in Rocinante podcast. And, we are hopeful that we can rebuild maybe some sort of shared identity before this all falls apart. But until that, we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Vengan a ver vuesas mercedes el retablo de la libertad de Melisendra, que es una de las cosas más de